Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hello friends, today I've got a Yorvo Lord of Garenbrig deck tech for you. This is a budget deck tech, specifically 1DH, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the commander, who can be up to $5. Total cost of this deck was just under $37 as of the day of recording. Do note that prices fluctuate, so where you see them at in this video, they may be above or below that point. Yorvo Lord of Garenbrig is a great +1/+1 counters commander, because he reads when he enters the battlefield, he comes with 4 +1/+1 counters, and then whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under our control, he gets another counter, and if that creature's power is greater than Yorvo's, he gets another counter on top of the first one. So he's going to grow slowly over time, regardless of what else is going on, because we're playing a creature heavy deck, and then we're going to have lots of creatures that synergize with those +1/+1 counters, or like to have +1/+1 counters themselves. As always, we're going to start out by talking about the Accelerants in this deck. Those are the cards that give us access to extra mana a little bit early so that we can get into our game plan. Our game plan is to make Yorvo as big as possible, or any of our other creatures as big as possible, and then just smash face. Cards for interference, we only have 5, so it looks small. Part of that's because we're playing such a bigs heavy deck that we're hoping through combat we're able to force our opponents into advantageous combat situations for us. And then we're going to look at the cards that provide us consistency, help the deck continue running smoothly. Lastly, we'll look at the lands. These are the cards that help us to cast the spells in this deck. So for Accelerants, we have Arbor Elf, Llanowar Tribe, and Llanowar Elves. These are all mana dorks, and they tap for mana or help us untap our lands. They're especially good because they enter and they give Yorvo +1/+1 counters, and they also help us to cast our other expensive cards in our deck. Incubation Druid and Rishkar Pima Renegade are dorks that care about +1/+1 counters. Zhang Yangu turns all of our creatures with +1/+1 counters into mana dorks, and he can also assign counters where he likes. Karametra's Acolyte taps for green equal to our devotion to green. Fertilid is a great mana sink because we can keep putting counters on him and then paying 2 to remove those counters to fetch lands out of our deck. Beanstalk Giant fits in well with this deck because he ramps us, and also he's a big creature himself. We just have to send him on an adventure before we bring him to the battlefield. We also have sorceries like Rampant Growth, Skyshroud Claim, Ranger's Path, which help us cheat lands from our library onto the battlefield early. Nissa's Pilgrimage, Ordeal of Nylea, and Hunting Wilds do the same. However, the Hunting Wilds can give us turn a couple of our lands into 3/3s, and the Ordeal of Nylea can also help get +1/+1 counters onto our creatures. Some of the creatures that we like to have with +1/+1 counters, these are creatures that are going to slowly grow over time, and regardless of how the game is going, as long as they stay on the battlefield, they're just going to get bigger and bigger. Scoop Mob, Wildborn Preserver, and Nessian Horn Beetle. We also have Ravenous Slime, Renegade Crassus, and Mowu Loyal Companion. The Crassus is especially good because he says he evolves, so when you play a creature that has greater power than him, he gets a +1/+1 counter, sort of similar to Yorvo. However, whenever he evolves, we get to put an additional +1/+1 counter on each other creature that has a +1/+1 counter on it that we control. So he can help grow our whole team. Orin Reef Hydra is another one of those cards that's just going to continue to grow over time. Whenever we play a land, or even if it's a forest, we get 2 +1/+1 counters. Any other lands is just getting 1. Verdurous Gearhulk enters and puts +1/+1 counters on whatever you want it to put counters on. And then the Verdant Force is a big beater that also helps to grow Yorvo turn over turn as it makes Saprolines at the beginning of our upkeep. Another card that helps us to continue growing Yorvo is the Squirrel Nest, as it will make us squirrel tokens turn over turn. For one-shot cards that help grow Yorvo a significant amount, we have Fungal Sprouting and Deep Forest Hermit. The fungal sprouting will essentially double Yorvo's size, or maybe even more depending on how large of a creature we have on the battlefield. And then the Deep Forest Hermit will give Yorvo 5 +1/+1 counters, in addition to getting a bunch of bodies onto the battlefield. Cards that are going to protect us and our game plan, we have Sporeback Troll, which can regenerate any of our creatures with +1/+1 counters. Experiment 1, which can sit out as a great blocker and eat up a lot of the damage that we would take otherwise. And then Sandworm Convergence can help grow our team every single turn. We get a 5/5 worm token at the end of our turn. Also, creatures with flying can't attack us or the planeswalkers we control. So we get a good sized body, and we continue to help grow Yorvo, and we can't get attacked by our opponent's flyers. Great fit in this deck. Cards that help get +1/+1 counters on our creatures, we have Renata, Called to the Hunt, and the Ivy Lane Denizen, Evolution Sage, and Loyal Guardian. These can help us get counters turn over turn. The 2 prior can help get counters each time creatures enter the battlefield. We also have Retreat to Kazandu, Death's Presence, and Hydra's Growth, which are all enchantments that care about +1/+1 counters. Retreat to Kazandu gives us a counter every time we play a land. Death's Presence gives us value off of our creatures that die. Whenever a creature dies, we get to put +1/+1 counters on another one of our creatures equal to the dying creature's power. So as long as the board isn't being wiped, if it's targeted removal or somebody's making us sacrifice a creature, we can still get some value out of that creature. Hydra's Growth is going to double the number of counters on whichever creature it's enchanting. Courage in Crisis, Planewide Celebration, and Biogenic Upgrade can help us really explode, as they have words like proliferate or double the number of counters on a creature. Planewide Celebration has multiple modes, so you might not want to use proliferate every time, but we primarily have it in this deck so that we can proliferate. Once we've gotten those creatures huge, we want to give them some kind of evasion so that they can get in for combat damage. Most common evasion in green is Trample. So we have Fists of Ironwood, which helps grow Yorvo and gives something Trample. And then Trollbred Guardian and Tuskguard Captain give all of our creatures with +1/+1 counters Trample. Cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan, we have Reclamation Sage, Flaxen Intruder, and Return to Nature, which can all destroy artifacts or enchantments. Return to Nature can also hit a card from a graveyard, and the Flaxen Intruder, if we don't need it to remove artifacts or enchantments, we can use it as a sorcery, casting Welcome Home, giving us 3 bears, and growing Yorvo +3/+3. Do note that the Flaxen Intruder, you do have to deal combat damage with it to destroy an artifact or enchantment, so you'll usually have to work with the other players at the table to kind of deal with the most threatening player if it's not you. As far as creature removal, we do have Titanic Brawl, which allows us to make one of our creatures fight an opponent's creature, and then Thorn Mammoth, which when it enters gets to fight something. As a 6/6, it's going to be able to win a lot of fights that it gets into, and then every time we play a creature, we also can make it fight again, so you can make it actually fight multiple times in a single turn. Just be careful that you don't kill this to combat or fighting damage, because it remembers its damage from each fight. Cards that provide us consistency, we have Keeper of Fables, which draws us cards whenever we deal damage to opponents with non-humans. Soul of the Harvest draws us cards whenever we have a non-token creature enter the battlefield. We also have Armorcraft Judge and Inspiring Call, which draws cards for each creature that has a +1/+1 counter on it. Inspiring Call can also give our team Indestructible, protecting us from those destroy board wipes, or possibly just protecting a particular creature if they're using targeted removal and that situation demands that we protect that creature. We can use this instant as well to draw some cards and protect our board. We have a couple enchantments that provide us consistency in Colossal Majesty and Elemental Bond. The Majesty draws us a card at the beginning of our upkeep as long as we control a creature with power 4 or greater. Elemental Bond draws us a card every time we play a creature with power 3 or greater. We also have Bond of Flourishing, which allows us to look at the top 3 cards of our library. We're going to put one of those into our hand as long as it's a permanent, and then we're going to gain 3 life. We have 80 plus permanents in this deck, so you'll almost always get a hit off of Bond of Flourishing. For one-time big draw spells, we have Harmonize, Return of the Wild Speaker, and Shamanic Revelation. Harmonize gets us 3 cards. Return of the Wild Speaker draws us cards equal to the greatest power among non-humans we control. And then Shamanic Revelation draws us a card for each creature we control. The Revelation also has Ferocious, so can gain us 4 life for each creature we have with power 4 or greater. And then if we don't need cards, we can actually use Return of the Wild Speaker as a pump for our whole team, giving all of our non-human creatures +3/+3. For lands, we have Kaldheim Garden, which enters and gives us a chump blocker. It also helps to grow Yorvo. Llanowar Reborn gives us a one-time use to get a +1/+1 counter on a creature. Rogue's Passage gives us that much-needed evasion if Trample isn't getting the job done. We have Encroaching Wastes to deal with problematic lands our opponents might be running. Treetop Village, which gives us an extra attacker or blocker. The Gingerbread Cabin, which will help us to gain 3 life. Tranquil Thicket allows us to cycle it if we don't need it for a land. And then we have Mosswarp Bridge, which allows us to hide away a card. And then once we have 10 power on the battlefield, we can play that card out of exile. To round out our land package, we have 33 basic forests. Our deck had an average converted mana cost of 3.68, and there is the mana curve there. Pretty standard, I would say, as far as costs, at least among my play groups. Some deck or cards I would consider upgrading with are Pelt Collector, Mana Gorger Hydra, and the Steelbane Hydra. These are pretty budget-friendly upgrades. If you want to see some other upgrades, check out the link to the Tapped Out deck, where I have some other suggestions. Or better yet, leave your suggestions down in the comments below so that everybody else can alter this deck with the ideas that you share. Hope you enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your day. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, you should like the video. You can subscribe by hitting the icon in the top left. YouTube thinks you'll like the video on the top right. Otherwise, you can check out one of the playlists on the bottom. Have a great day.